لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا أما بعد. In the previous weeks what we mentioned, and just to revise very quickly through the whole thing so that we can come back in the picture. First we began mentioning that how Europe, especially Britain at one time when it was a superpower, and thereafter America when power changed over, one obsession that all of these countries had, superpowers, was to somehow get control of Al-Aqsa, the holy land of Palestine. So the question that we left at that time is why? Why did these countries allow so many of the soldiers to die, the reputation to be destroyed, just to get control of one land where in the world there is enough places which is uninhabited. But a land which had people, to make sure they remove those people and to get control of it, and not for themselves but for somebody else. What was the reason? Thereafter we explained that Europe, one part of Europe was Christian, one part of Europe became Jew, and the Jew and the Christian finally united, whereas the unification between a Jew and a Christian is something impossible. Where the Christian believes the Jew killed his God, how was it in one part of history a Christian church can stand up and say that we know you killed our God, but we'll forgive you, don't do it in future? How did they do that? It is something impossible. But they somehow did it. And not only did they forgive, they united to such an extent that the Christians have given their lives to make sure the Jews get settled in the land that they want. So we ask the question, why? So if a person has to read history, and a lot has been written, and we will not go into the details because this is not a lesson on history, but we will find that everyone comes up with the same conclusion, that behind every government there exists a certain power. And this power then is on control of the decisions the government takes. And this power will therefore be a power who loves the ambition of the Zionist foundation. And they will give everything to ensure that this takes place. And then in the books of history they explain who these powers are and who is behind this society, behind that society. But one problem always comes at the ending, that when the question is asked that how did that power become so strong, there is no answer. Every historian will take you up to that power which is ruling the whole country. But when the question is brought, how did that power become so powerful? We explained like how a Jewish lobby has taken control over the entire, what we call the international press, the media, the theater, the cinemas, the sports, over the banks of the world, over every major industry that man can think about. We say there is one power running that whole thing. But the question is, how did that one power become so powerful? Why did it have to be a Jewish power loyal to a Zionist mission that could become so powerful? Why could not a Muslim power become so powerful? Why couldn't a Christian power, a Hindu power, and throughout history one power, and no one able to remove that power? For example, you will find many historians will mention the example of a family called the Rothschild family, the Rothschild family. So regarding this family, they mention that there was a man whose name was Amschel Moses, and he was a small-time banker in a certain state. And then suddenly he started finding success to such an extent that now he started borrowing money to the people around him. And then he got more rich, so he began borrowing money to the country. And then he got more rich, so he began borrowing money to international, other countries around. And thereafter his ambitions went so high that this one man, who then took the nickname of Rothschild, he had 5 sons. So just listen to this and think whether it's possible ever in history for such a thing to happen. They say that he had 5 children, And his ambitions reached very high levels. So he thereafter sends each child of his to a major country with the ambition that you must take over the whole country. So they say the first child he sends to Frankfurt to take control of the entire Germany economy. What a dream. The second to Vienna to take control of Austria. The third to London to take control of England. The fourth to Naples to take control of Italy. The last to Paris to take control of France. If he had another 5 chances, he would have taken control of the whole world. Like a fairy tale it sounds. Can one family have such an ambition? If one family in Azadville stands up and say, I got 5 sons. In 5 years they will rule the whole of Azadville. Let's do it now. It won't happen. But this man's ambition, he died and in his own sons' lives were realized. They took control of the whole economy of each of the countries they were sent to. How is that possible? So historians will mention he did this, he did that, but the question comes, why couldn't somebody else do the same thing? And that one family who then took control remained in control from that time, the 1800s, up till today. And no one has been able to push them out of control. If you say the man on top was a brain, he died. How did the brains remain with his sons, then his grandsons, then his great-grandsons? Everyone got brains in that family, the rest of the world got no brains. It is something that we will call impossible, but it happened. Thereafter we will see in America's history, a family like a Rockefeller family came. They became so strong in such a small period of time that it became famous. If you want to become president of America, this family must put you up. Jimmy Carter became one president of America. They say 3 years before he became president, he was unknown. Then one day he had a meal with one of the Rockefeller families. And they liked him for some reason. After 3 years, he became president of the entire America. Whereas 3 years before, no one knew him. When a man becomes in charge of a country, there's some history behind what he did for the country, what struggles he went through, how he was tortured. And now the people say, because he suffered for the country, make him in charge. But these people, they became president. Why? Because they met the right family. And amazing, the Rockefeller family had the ability to make somebody else president, but they never made themselves president. The Rothschild, they say, behind everything in the world, but they never became in charge of the world. Just a power behind. So the same question comes, who gave the Rockefeller family that power? And who gave the Rothschild family that power? And then any revolution that took place in history, if you look at it, you will see the same thing happened. It was a man who was unknown. Suddenly he joined a certain society. And in a few years of his life, he did what the mind cannot fathom. He took control of a whole country. He was never caught. Whereas in South Africa, we know a couple of people got together. They wanted to make a revolution. There and there they were caught. Finished the whole thing, put away. But these people, with the entire force of the army in the control of the government, they stood up without any fear. They formed a society and they took over the whole thing. It is something which the mind cannot accept that this is reality, but it's happened. Couple of examples of this is, when it was in Germany, it was a man named Hitler. From nowhere he took over the whole country and he did whatever he wanted to. The Soviet Union became the strongest nation that the world knew regarding military power. It was a man called Stalin and Lenin. They came up from nowhere and they took over everything. And like that, in Cuba there was a man called Castro. In America it was Benjamin Franklin, George Washington. From nowhere they just came up. And whatever ambition they had was somehow fulfilled. No one was able to stop them. So to find out what was that power behind them, we have to look for some factor that was common amongst all these people. And there are many others in history who don't have time to go into it. We'll just take a couple of these people, one factor or couple of factors that is common with them, to find out what power lies behind them. And when we realize that power, then we know that power is the enemy that we are facing. And it is not these families that we speak of, a Jewish lobby, and we speak of a Rothschild family and a Rockefeller family. We speak of Hitler, Stalin, Lenin. But the power behind these people. Among these people, a couple of things that were common in all of them is, number one, they all had a great hatred for religion. Whether it was Christianity, whether it was the Jewish religion, whether it was Islam. They hated religion to such an extent that from majority of their mouths the sentence came out that if religion can be destroyed, then man will find success in life. And the mind must be in charge of everything. The second thing, all of them pushed that one government must control the whole world. A one world order. Hitler was looking for it, Stalin and Lenin. There was a man called Karl Marx. He wrote the entire constitution, how to get it. America is pushing for it, Britain pushed for it. Everyone is pushing for this one world order. And we must be in charge. Second thing in common. The third thing in common is every one of these leaders, before they became leaders, you will find they joined a certain society which is known as the secret societies of history. And each of those societies were grounded in the worship of Satan. So for every person to become who he became, the first thing he had to do was give up religion and say, I worship a shaitan, a certain power. Some of them openly mentioned we are part of the societies. Some kept quiet and others found out they are part of it. So that's the third thing in common. The fourth thing in common is when each person became in power, of whichever country he became in power, the principles that he thereafter followed were always the same. No matter which country it was, no matter what party he was, whether he said socialist, capitalist, communist, they followed the same principles. One is that religion will be abolished. A tax will be placed upon the people of the country. A central bank will be brought into power that will rule the economy of the country. The schools will be controlled. The media will be controlled. And they are like that many. And those policies that they followed, if someone has to read it, and thereafter someone reads what they call later on the protocols of the elders of Zion, they will find is the exact same. If someone has to reach a constitution which a man called Karl Marx wrote up, he was a man who was devoted to a certain witch, a woman, who said she has contact with the demon. And he wrote this constitution. He never had the chance to bring it into power. Later on, Stalin and Lenin brought that whole thing into power. So his constitution, the protocols of the elders of Zion, and the principles that all these leaders followed are all the same. So when we look at that now, we come back to 2 points. That if we can work out, we will work out what is the power behind all of these people. One is, who are these secret societies? And the second is, who is the author of the protocols of the elders of Zion? Of the principles which all these people have to follow. Because the very fact they're following these principles means they are loyal to the person who started the principle. If you can work out these two things, who is behind every society, and the second, who is in control of these protocols of the elders of Zion, then we have found what is that power behind every evil that's taking place in the world. And if we find that, then in the hadith we can look for the remedy how to fight it. One person very nicely made the claim that in history he said it was never ever that the rich people joined these societies. Rather it was found whoever joined the society, he became rich and he became in power. So it means the society brings the man in power. What a strong society this must be. If you look regarding the history of these societies, when they started, so obviously there will be many of them, but every historian has mentioned that they are all one and the same. They have just taken different names in different countries. In 1770, they mention a group called Freemasons were established. And again, it's the same story. Freemasons is a group of people who were Masons. They were working with stone. Now, a person who does work with stone is a builder. A builder is not a man you're going to think who's going to become in charge of the world. He's working with stone, like a carpenter. Couple of carpenters gather together and say, now tomorrow we'll take over the world. People will laugh at them. At least if you're a politician, you can talk. But these couple of stone builders get together and they decide to form a new religion, what they call a Freemason religion. And it takes off so fast that within 100 years they have established themselves in every major country of the world. And they are behind all the rules that are passed in every country of the world. In 1770, the group was named the Illuminati, which up till today is famous. A very strong group which they say was behind every major world war that took place. The Illuminati. A priest in Germany, he formed this group. And when he formed this group, he's saying, look at his words. He says, in my life, I never thought I could be used to found a new religion for the world. In my life, I never thought that I would ever be used to start a new religion for the rest of the world. As soon as he founded this thing, it was already in his mind, this religion of his, Illuminati, will take control of the whole world. So who was using him to start it? And thereafter, in different countries of the world, different groups started. Regarding this Illuminati, they say it was a group that started when they finally settled in France. In 13 years, they were able to bring about the French Revolution. Now imagine 13 years to take over the whole country. Something not possible. But these groups were doing it. Again, the same thing. Who is behind this group? There was a group called the Skull and Bones in America, a Ku Klux Klan in America, Carbonari in Italy, Vemgarit in Germany, Nihilista in Russia, the Knights of the Golden Circle, and like this throughout the world, groups with different names, all of them behind one motto. It said in 1919, Hitler joined one of these societies. It was known as the Thule Society, known for sun worship. It was known that they are Satanists who practice magic. So the person who brought Hitler into this group, his name was Dietrich. So this man, while he's on his deathbed, he says, he's telling his people around him, and he was like the leader of the Satanists of that society. He started the Nazi society and the Thule society. So he says to his people, and the same Hitler, what was the reason of his power, will then be the reason of all these people's power, who we said all had the same principles. So he gave it away on his deathbed, this person. He says to the people around him, you all must follow Hitler. He says, this man will later on in history dance, but it will be me who will be playing the tune. He's going to die now, he's on his deathbed, but he says he will dance, meaning he'll become popular. But I am the power behind him. He says, I have initiated him into the sacred doctrine. I have opened his centers in vision, and I have given him the means to communicate with the powers. He says, do not cry when I die, because I shall influence history more than any other German has ever done. A man was dying, but he was already seeing what's going to happen later on. But the sentence that he gave away the secret of the powers of all these people is, I have allowed him to start communicating with the powers. Now what is that powers? That power is a Satan power, what we will call shaitan. And that is that power which is the secret behind every person's success. If a person has to read the protocols of the elders of Zion, I just went over a couple of it. And I had yaqeen that no one but a shaitan could have written this, or could have dictated it. Among the protocols of this, Henry Ford, he took it out in his time in 1912 most likely. So he's writing that when I read these protocols, I felt it was written 5 or 10 years ago. Because it's what's happening now. When I read it, I felt it was written yesterday. It's what's happening now. Henry Ford says, then I got news in 1800 it was already found in one university. So it could have been in the 1700s, it could have been in the 1600s. But the man who wrote it at that time had a vision of what's going to happen in the future. One of the things that's written, we will take control of the press in such a manner that one word that we will say will go around the whole world and everyone will listen to what we speak about. Now in the 1700s, do you think a man could have written that about the international press? When the media was only starting, whether at that time it started, I don't even know. As if the man knew what today is in charge of the press, that person who wrote it. In these protocols, there is no such thing that we must do this, we must do that, but it's predictions, as though a Nabi is speaking. A man who has wahi, what's going to happen in the future. We will do this, we will do that, we will do that, we will do that. We will establish a system, a central banking system around the world. In that time, who could have thought of a central banking system? We will destroy religion, for it's the cause of the problems of mankind. We will establish this, we will establish that. The Gentiles will be our biggest problem. As long as we need them, we will use them. Until when we don't need them, we will get rid of them. The Gentiles is everyone besides the Zionists of the world. And one very amazing thing that the person who wrote it, he's writing from his leader. He writes in the protocols that these protocols are meant to be followed. No one has the ability to discuss it or change it. The only power who has the ability to change it is the very power who was the first to dictate it. Now, if the person who wrote it was in 1700, how is he going to change it today? But they're writing that power which was the first to dictate it will be the power that will have the chance to change it. And then he says another amazing thing. That power, which has been the power which has been ruling us from the beginning, which is ruling us now, and which will continue ruling us in the future. Meaning a power that death will not come out on. That power cannot be man. That power is a shaitan. So whether it was their own words that they mentioned that we are following a certain demon that is telling us what to do, or whether it's in the protocols that we see a demon power behind it, something that can't die, we understand one point, that the power behind all the evil of the world is a certain shaitan. Now which shaitan can be so powerful to do such a thing? A shaitan, number one, who has the knowledge of things that will happen in the future, and who can speak with such determination that the people who listen to the shaitan, they are actually able to write the books of history. There was a certain man in 1912, he wrote, "The True Administrator," something like that what will happen in America in 1925. And exactly how I wrote it in 1912, in 1925, practically the same thing happened. Only one thing, one man spelled it last minute and the whole thing had to be scratched. But whatever he wrote exactly was put into operation 1925. Now how can a man in 1912 predict the future? But with so much conviction they were speaking. When this man spoke about Hitler, that I will make such an influence in history which no German has ever made, at that time nothing was happening. The conviction they got was because of the conviction of the demon behind them. So we are looking for a shaitan here who has the ability to predict the future. One. We are looking for a shaitan here who introduces himself to people and is not shy. Whereas we know Iblis doesn't come out in the open. When Iblis wanted people to worship him, it was through idol worship. It was in a hidden manner. It was through the whispering of a waswas, do this, do that. But here we are looking for a demon where the man says openly, I am communicating with the demon. A shaitan who is not scared to open himself up to people. And if you do what I want, I will give you what you want. Ajib powers. A shaitan who is extremely powerful. A shaitan who can predict the future. A shaitan who can open up himself to people. A shaitan who invites people towards his worship. Openly. That you must worship me. And those people then in the name that they say we are the son of Lucifer, or we are the son of the mind, or we are the son of this great power. A shaitan who invites people to worship him. Now who is the shaitan? And if we can find who the shaitan is, then we can establish who is the power behind all the evil that is happening in the world. A shaitan so strong that in his own evil he will have the deaths. Example, in the Soviet Union they say 50 million people were killed because of the Soviet revolution. And fitna, a evil which was responsible in one place for the death of over 50 million people. Many of them were Muslim, all wiped out. A fitna who was responsible for many Islamic states becoming murtad. A fitna that was responsible for the entire Christian church becoming atheist. A fitna which was responsible for all the filth we see on the television. A fitna responsible for bringing up the pop stars, whether we call them the Beatles or everyone else. The person who wrote the songs for the Beatles, if you read his songs, you will see a shaitan was influencing him. How will it be if there is no religion? How will it be if there is one government? How will it be if we can do what we want? How will it be if we have to worship no God? A man who's writing that day is a man influenced by a shaitan. Such words that came out of his mouth made no sense to the elders, but the youngsters just enjoyed it. A fitna behind every pop star that came out and became big in the world. A fitna behind every person who became the leader of the world. Suddenly, from nowhere. A fitna behind the Rothschild family becoming so strong, telling them what to do so you can make money. A fitna behind all the banks of the world running the whole thing. A fitna behind interests becoming so prevalent, as Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned in the hadith, it will hit every single person of the world. And if you stay away from the banks, the smoke of interest will hit you. Who's the fitna behind that? Which shaitan? If we have to look in the hadith, you will find that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that if ever there had to be a fitna in the world, which will cause such havoc, that will go through every nation and every religion. And he said that there has been no fitna from the time Allah Pak created Adam alayhi salam till the day of Qiyamah, but one fitna. What fitna is that? That is the fitna of Dajjal. Now you might wonder, Dajjal is a shaitan? Dajjal is a shaitan. Shaitanun muwaththaqun. He's a shaitan who has been put in chains. And he's a shaitan who will be given power at the end of time to come out and do his mischief. The question is, can the shaitan influence whatever is happening around the world? Can he talk to people? Can he convince people what to do? Can he make himself open? Can he predict the future? So we find in the time of Nabi Pak sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a man by the name of Tamim Dari radiallahu anhu came. He mentioned to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam certain things which Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam got so happy, he gathered all the Sahaba. He said, listen to this man, it's exactly what I told you is going to happen. He's saying the same thing. And then Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam through his Mubarak mouth speaks, mentioned in Muslim Sharif and many other hadith kitabs, that this man together with 29 other people, they were in a certain boat, they crashed, they reached an island, and they saw a certain jinn, a woman. So the first thing we understand, in the power of this shaitanun muwaththaqun Dajjal are the jinn of the world. And if he himself cannot go out to introduce himself, he got his jinnah to bring people to take him. So this woman says to them, you're finding me amazing. My master is waiting for you. Why don't you go and visit him in the house? And all 30 of them go to see this person. They say, a very young person, shabun, young. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Dajjal is shabun, very young, shaykhun, very old also. Very young because he looks young, very old. When he was born, who knows when he was born? He could have been born years ago in the time of Sulaiman alayhi salam. A shaitan who was tied up. Either he was born tied up or it was Sulaiman alayhi salam himself who tied him up and who put him away, that he cannot open himself up. But he had the ability to bring these people to him. And thereafter he speaks to them, he asks them questions, what's happening around the world. And thereafter he predicts to them what's going to happen in the future. A certain river is going to dry up. A certain plantation is not going to give fruits in the future. This and this is going to happen. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is going to get control over all the Arabs. Then the time will come when I will do this, I will do that, I will go here, I will go there, I will enter. A shaitan able to predict what's going to happen in the future. A shaitan who could convince people to such an extent. There was a man by the name of Ibn Sayyad. His ahadith are found in the books of Mishkat. Nabi Pak sallallahu alaihi wasallam had wahi that a certain Dajjal is going to be born. And he mentioned to the Sahaba radiallahu anhu the family of this Dajjal. So when they got the news of it, a certain Jewish family gave birth. After 40 years waiting for a child, and the child came, they all went. Most likely it was Abdullah bin Zubair radiallahu anhu and others first. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam got the news, he went, Umar radiallahu anhu went. They were very scared. Throughout their life they were scared. Is this really Dajjal? This Ibn Sayyad. Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu said, let me kill him. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if he is really Dajjal, it will be Isa alayhi salam who's going to kill him. But he really showed himself that I'm a person with different powers. Or getting thoughts of things that are going to happen. So whatever happened to this person happened. But one amazing thing about him is that one time he was entering Makkah Mukarramah with a certain Sahabi. So that Sahabi says, I was very scared of him because everyone knew that most likely maybe this is Dajjal. Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhu, take qasam, this is Dajjal. So he says to the Sahabi that, the people are calling me Dajjal. How can I be Dajjal? I went to Medina Munawwara, I live there. Whereas Dajjal can't go to Medina. He says, and I'm making Hajj. I'm a Muslim. Dajjal is going to make Hajj. So the Sahabi Ridhwan says, I got a little bit itminan now, content that this man is okay. So thereafter this Ibn Sayyad says to the Sahabi, but if they offered me the job of being Dajjal, I would have accepted it also. And then he laughs and he says, as for Dajjal himself, I know when he was born, and I know where he is. I know where he was and I know where he is. And then the Sahabi gets shocked. And then he laughs again. Later on in history, a time came where a certain Tabi'i says they were attacking a Christian nation. And then that night the Jews were celebrating like a party. So he asked one person, what's happening? They said, no, our leader has come. And with this leader we're going to take over everyone. So he says he waited that morning to see who that leader is in the tent. And when the tent opened, he said one man looked out and he's looking this way and that way. And he said, from the distance I saw it looked just like Ibn Sayyad. But the one eye that was a little bit bulging out. Now if Dajjal is Dajjal himself, we have found an example in history where he was able to influence a Jew by the name of Ibn Sayyad to take up what he wanted to do. And he gave him such powers that the Jews of that entire area brought him in their tent. And they said, with this leader of ours, we will take over everything. That power which influenced Dajjal, that which influenced Ibn Sayyad, and that power which was able to speak to those 30 people, 23 of them accepted Islam. The remaining 27 is not known what happened. And if that power could communicate to 30 people in the time of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ibn Sayyad immediately after the time of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what's the difficulty of that power communicating throughout history with people? And that power is that power which Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, no fitna has been created from the time of Adam alayhi salam till the day of Qiyamah, worse than the fitna of Dajjal. And then Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said a very amazing thing. And I will tell you one thing which no other Nabi ever told his people. That Dajjal will have one eye, and your God does not have one eye. When Benjamin Franklin was made in charge of producing the seal of the USA, then it took great amount of effort, and they said they went to great amount of religious writings, and finally they came up with a seal which many Christians did not want, but throughout history it was pushed and it made sure it remained the seal of the USA. That seal was, the pyramids were 13 pieces. Whatever the number 13 is, it's always a Masonic belief. Maybe the 13 tribe, 12 tribes of the Bani Israel, the one tribe of Judah, the Jew. The 13 pieces of the pyramid with one eye on the top. So when the Christians, America was a Christian country, when they asked that what is this one eye and what is this pyramid, so he explained, no, it's nothing big. It is the United States, meaning all the states will gather together to make support, ruled by the eye of the providence, by the eye of God. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I will tell you one thing which no other Nabi mentioned, that he will have one eye and your God hasn't got one eye. It was Benjamin Franklin telling them that this is our country. The rule of Fir'aun, governed by the eye of Dajjal. This is where we get our instructions from. This is where we get our inspiration from. This is the man who is behind all our moves. This is the man who is behind all our success. And we will continue pushing until we get Masjid Aqsa. And we can build for this man the temple of Sulaiman. So this man can finally come out of his shackles. And the day he does that, then he will take the seat of the ruler of the entire world. And the Zionist movement will rule the entire world. And this is why every person who becomes great has to push for that Mubarak land of Palestine. And this is why that move will continue going. And they will not stop until they can finally get that place. Only Nabi Pak sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that just before the time comes when he will get it, and Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala will create a man called Mahdi. And he will make his war. And when the Dajjal finally does come out and he will want to take over, and Hazrat Mahdi and the army will be forced, then Isa alayhi salatu wasalam will finally come. At that time, every Zionist, every Jew who knows the truth, will look at Isa alayhi salam and will realize that they fell in the worst deception they could ever think about. And they fell in the worship of a man who was the worst to ever follow. وَإِن مِّنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا لَيُؤْمِنَنَّ بِهِ قَبْلَ مَوْتِهِ. Every Jew will believe in Isa alayhi salam before his death, but it will be too late. وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يَكُونُ عَلَيْهِمْ شَهِيدًا. And when the Christian will see Isa alayhi salam, they will all fall down and say, we make tawbah, what we did was wrong. And the Muslims will all be behind Isa alayhi salam. At that time, everything in the world will come right. And the one rule which Allah tabarak wa ta'ala promised the people of ibadah, وَلَقَدْ كَتَبْنَا فِي الزَّبُورِ مِنْ بَعْدِ الذِّكْرِ أَنَّ الْأَرْضَ يَرِثُهَا عِبَادِيَ الصَّالِحُونَ will then take place. So this thing is not yet ended now, it's just starting. We have understood one thing, and most likely this is correct. But it is a theory which is not established in any hadith, that behind every evil there is Dajjal. However, it's a theory which is not negated by any hadith also. Rather, if you look at the hadith, you will really feel, when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned one fitna that has never been created till Qiyamah will never been created. What a great fitna. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught Sahaba radiallahu anh, like how he taught them a surah of Quran. Oh Allah, I seek protection from Jahannam. Oh Allah, I seek protection from the grave. Oh Allah, I seek your protection from Dajjal. What a big fitna he must be, that was Jahannam, and the punishment of the grave must, the Dajjal is number 3. So until the next time we speak, inshallah, we make one thing, that every day after every salah, Nabi Pak sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught Sahaba radiallahu anh, at the ending of your salah, make one dua. Oh Allah, I seek protection from Jahannam. Oh Allah, I seek your protection from the punishment of the grave. Oh Allah, I seek your protection from the evil of Dajjal. May Allah tabarak wa ta'ala grant us all protection.